We have a full course on Swift syntax, and if you're new to the Swift programming language, I highly recommend going through it. For now, I'm going to attempt to give you a quick intro into Swift in under 5 minutes. It is just the basics that you need to know, and it assumes you've seen some programming language concepts before. There are just 4 key concepts to understand before we can start coding: variables, control flow, classes, and functions. Hopefully, you're watching this video as Xcode downloads. Ready? Here we go. Variables. If you want to declare a variable in Swift, the var keyword lets you do that. As an example, here we have a variable called x of type int, and we're setting its value to 42. Note the semicolons are not needed. Do you see something else that's a bit odd? That's right. The type of this variable comes after the variable name, different than most other languages. The reason for this is that Swift can infer the type of the variable, so in most cases you can leave the type completely off. For example, here I could just make x equal to 42. Now something else you're going to encounter in your code is a constant. For example, here we have y that is a constant of type int with the value of 100. Swift has inferred the type int because we're setting it to an int value. The next type of variable that you need to deal with are strings. They're easy too. Let me show you an example. Here we have a variable of type string, and I'm setting its value to hello. Moving on to control flow. The only item that you need to know for control flow is if statements. If statements can determine what branch or path your code should take. As an example, if I put something like this, we can take one path if x is less than 50 and a different path if x is greater than or equal to 50. If we want to see what path is chosen, we can open the debug console and take a look at that. That's this middle button here on the upper right. We're going to cover loops and the powerful switch statements in the later part of this course. Classes are objects which allow you to store values and have functions that operate on those values. The really interesting part of classes is that they have inheritance, and therefore they can carry forward any values and functionalities from their parent, called a superclass. If we look at this view controller definition here, we can see that it inherits from UI view controller, and any instances or class functions that I have would go here in the middle, where I have these 2 green comment lines. You can declare class variables that live in the class and functions that exist in every instance of that class. Just remember 2 things about classes in Swift. Everything in between the curly braces for the class is inside the class and available to any function in the class, and the UI view controller here is what this class inherits from, and it will be our hint where to look for built-in functionality. That is, what functionality our view controller class inherits from its parent, UI view controller. Functions are a way to encompass code and to make it more reusable. Functions start with the keyword func, followed by a name, then any parameters, and the return type. Here's an example of the most basic function. It takes no parameters, and it returns nothing. It just prints out hello. We can call this function by doing something like this. We can see hello here is printed out in the debug console. We can also have functions that take a parameter. For example, if you wanted to print hello in many languages, we could write a function like this: print hello message, that takes in a hello message string. Here we just simply called it hello string. It's of type string, and then we print that message. To call this function, we'd simply do something like this: print hello message and pass it the message that we wanted to send. In this case, a hello greeting in Portuguese. So here we have the hello greeting in English with the regular function, taking in no parameters, returning nothing. And we have the Portuguese greeting for the function that takes in 1 parameter string. It also doesn't return anything. It just simply runs the print command. That's just a little bit of Swift that you need to know before we dive into Xcode and iOS development. I've included a link below on our Swift refresher and other resources if you want to learn more. Hopefully, you'll finish downloading and installing Xcode. When you're ready, let's go about creating your first iOS app.